Caleb here from Tosa Tool. Today I want to talk about the modular angle plate. So I'll go through kind of an unboxing of it, then I'll talk about all the included components, and then put it together and mount a sample setup to it, or a couple sample setups. So it should come in a box pretty similar to this, so let's see what's inside. So first thing is the assembly instructions. So I'll get back to these when I actually put it together. So first we have the actual modular angle plate. So this is 8.5 inches square. So as you can see, this is wrapped in a plastic wrap. So I'll just take this plastic wrap off. Okay, and there's a little packing grease on this, and this is to keep all the rust off of this plate. And next is the plate that mounts this modular plate onto the table. So this also has the plastic wrap on it. Okay. And this one also has the packing grease on it, so that should stay good. And finally, I have the angle brace. So this one mounts the two plates together and it keeps them square. And then for the hardware bag, so first we have two 1/2-inch precision locating pins. And these are 1.5 inches long. And then 4 1/2-13 socket-head cap screws. And 4 3/8-16 socket-head cap screws. Alright, now let's put this together. So first, I'm going to mount the modular angle plate to the mounting plate. So I'm going to make sure that these counterbores on the threaded in counterboard holes are facing out, and also the counterboard mounting holes. And make sure that the counterbores on these counterboard mounting holes are faced up. And I'm going to put these two pins, line these up and put them in to both like that. And this second pin is a little tight, it looks like, to get in there. So what I'm going to do is take a brass hammer, and this is $4 at Harbor Freight, so it's worth every penny, because if you use a steel hammer and pound on one of these pins, it will mushroom the end of the pin, and that will make it really hard to go in all the way, or take them out if you need to take them out. But first I'm going to keep them in place with these 3/8-16 socket-head cap screws. So I'm just going to thread these in a little bit, but not so they're tight, just to keep it all together. And I'll use an Allen wrench. Okay, so they're loose, but they'll keep it together while I tap this pin in. Okay, that looks about good. And then I'll tighten these 3/8 socketed cap screws down. Okay, so those should be tight. Now to put the angle brace on. So I'll use these other two 3/8 socketed cap screws. And so on the instruction sheet, it says attach support at the two ends, tighten slowly alternating screws. So I'll put both of these screws in lightly so they're not tight. And then once both of them are in, I'll tighten them up individually. So that one's loose. Put this other one in. Okay. So both of these are hand tight. So now I'll tighten these up, alternating the screws. So tighten this one up a little bit and then tighten. Okay, so all right, so those look tight. So now we can mount this to our modular plate. So I'll get it where I want it. And then I'll put 2 1/2-inch locating pins from your pin kit for the locating holes. Okay, so those went in pretty well. I'm just going to tap them in a little bit more with that plastic and brass hammer. Okay, and all right, that looks good. And now we can bolt them down with the 4 1/2-13 socketed cap screws that come with your kit. And I'll use another Allen wrench to tighten these down. Okay, looks like those are tight. So now I'm going to mount a hex bar stock to it. So if we wanted to face the end of this or mount some holes in it, or whatever you want to do with just the end of it. So I'll see where I want it, put it about right there. I'll put a couple dowel pins in on the side and a threaded locating pin. And this one should be good right here. I'll tighten this down. Okay, and that looks good right there. And then, so we're gonna need to clamp it down. So I'll use a couple clamps from the modular clamping kit. So let's use one of these 4.5-inch clamps, and let's see where I'll want this. And okay, so I'm going to use one of these 3-inch studs and mount a guided clamp support onto it. And I'm going to thread that into one of the holes, but I'm going to put a jam nut on it so I can secure it to the mounting plate. Let's put that in this one. And it looks like this might be a little too high, so I'll just take this jam nut off. And let's see if this is good. And it looks like that should be good right there. You adjust it a little. Okay. And now I'm going to use one of these 4-inch studs. And this one I can use a jam nut on. So put this on a ways. And then thread it into one of the holes, and I'm going to tighten this jam nut on. Okay. And then with this one I'm actually going to use a spring. So I'm going to use a spring, and then I'll put a washer on, and then on the bottom of the clamp, and then another washer on the top of the clamp, and then a flange nut to bolt it all down. Okay. And you can cut these or grind these springs down to make them a little more customized for your application. Let's put those back out. And it actually looks like this spring is interfering a bit with the part, so I'm just going to take that spring off because it's not necessary. It's just good for modularity so if you clamp something down, you can clamp it down and then work on your part, and then loosen it, undo it, take your part out, put another one in, and clamp it right back down. So easier with that, but for this I won't use it. But I'll still use a washer on the top between the clamp and the flange nut. And center that, adjust it a little bit. And I can tighten this down. Oh, make sure it's square up against the locating pins and tighten it down. And now we can put holes in our part or do something else to this edge on here. So let's mount another setup. Right. And this time I'll use a round solid stock. So let's plant this in. This looks a bit high, so put this threaded locating pin down a bit further. And let's see how far we want it down. So this should be good right here. And I'll put that right at the bottom there. And this bolt, or this stud, is a little too close. So I'm just gonna move that back a little bit. And with this one I can just move it one back. And take this off. Move it back one. And tighten it back down. And see if this is still a good place for it. And it looks like it is a great place. So we can use this one, and I'll just put this flange nut right back on there, and adjust this other one a little bit. And that should be a pretty good height. And now we can put another mount on here too. So let's go with another one like this. So I think this one should work right here. So I'll put a 4-inch stud, and again I'll put a jam nut on it to keep it in place. And let's make sure that lines up, and it does. Okay, tighten that down. And now I'm going to put these feet on a 3-inch clamp, hopefully this goes far enough down. So let's just see if this is a good height. So put this back in, and that looks really good right there. So I can clamp these two on. I'll clamp the top one first since it's already there, but I can put a flange nut on this one just to keep it in place. And now I can move that out of the way. That's the nice thing about this one. So you can loosen it and then get it out of the way. So make sure this is in the center, and make sure this stack is up against the locating pins, and then I can tighten this down. Okay, so that one's tight, and just to make sure it's accurately or appropriately clamped, let's tighten this other one on. Okay, now all of it's really snug. Now you can work on the end of this one too. You can mill it off, or again put holes in the end of it, or whatever you want to do. So now let's take this one off and then look at a little different part. Okay, so for this next setup, we'll use a part that is going to be an AR lower receiver. So I'll mount this in, and so what we're going to want to do on here is to take off this part, make a slot inside of it, and machine out a bunch of different things. So I'll set it up. So should be about here. So I'll put a couple precision dowel pins in where we'll want it. Okay, so that should be good right there, and then I'll put a threaded locating pin right here on the side and tighten this one up. Okay, now to clamp it down. So this is aluminum 4 tall, if you're familiar with it. So I'm not going to use these brass clamps, these clamping pads. I'm going to use some ABS clamping pads. So these will be a lot nicer to this aluminum. The brass might mark it up or something. So I'll just use these with the longer 6.5 inch clamps. So let's see where we're going to want this. And I'll use this hole right here. So I'm going to use a 4-inch stud from our clamping kit. And again, I'm going to put a jam nut on this. And I think this is the same one. Yeah. So I'm going to put in this hole. thread it in there, and then I can tighten this jam nut down. Okay. And again, I'm going to put one of these, the feet on a 3-inch stud. And let's see if this is the right height we want. Okay, so yeah, that should give us a really good height. Okay, make sure that's all lined up. And it looks like on this one we can use a spring. So use a spring and a washer, and then another on the other side of the clamp I'll use a washer and a flange nut. Okay, so that went on pretty well. Now we can clamp it right where we want it. Nice and movable. So I'll just clamp it right there. And looks like these are right heights. So first make sure this is absolutely square and tied up against these locating pins, and then I can tighten this down. Okay, so that's pretty tight right there, and for good measure I'll put another one right here, and that should be a pretty good place for it. So I'll do that same thing again, but just in a different place. So I'm going to put a 4-inch stud with the jam nut. Into this hole, I think it was. And I can tighten this jam nut down. And now I'll put this clamping foot down with a 3-inch stud. And again, I'll put another jam nut. I can put a jam nut on the top of this to keep it secured in place, but I'll leave it loose for now. And I can actually do that on this one too. So I'll tighten this one down. Okay. So just so that when I take this one off, or I loosen this, this will stay in place and won't move at all. So let's see if this is the right height and get it to about the right height. So it's pretty even. And then we tighten this jam nut down here. Okay. And then I can put a another spring on this one. So I'll put the spring on and then a washer. And then on the other side of the clamp, I'll put a washer and a flange nut. Okay, and that looks pretty square, so I can position that to where I want it and tighten this one down. And since we're using plastic, I don't want to tighten it down too much or else it'll just break the plastic. So now it's nice and clamped. Now we can do work on the top of this. So we can machine this little flange off and then machine the inside of the receiver, and we can do a bunch of stuff with this right here, and then we can, you know, unclamp this, move it around a little bit, do the bottom for where the magazine goes, and you know, finish our part. So nice thing about this modular angle plate is that, you know, if you need edge work on a part, it's really easy to mount it up so that it's accessible. So if you needed to, you know, face the top of this hex stock, or if you need to put holes in it or edge holes in it, or if you need to take this part, for example, you know, if you need to work on the top of it, or things that might be awkward to put in a vise, like a really long bar stock, like this circular stock, if, you know, and even if this was really long, it would be really difficult to put in a vise. And it's perfect for if you have a 4th axis on your Tormach PCNC. So it mounts right to the 4th axis and acts kind of like a 5th axis. And it can also be used as a really easy material stop for your 4th axis. And you can situate it so it mounts like a vise. So instead of being perpendicular to me as I'm looking at the table, you know, you can mount it parallel. So I'm facing my part, so it'll be really easy to see what the machine is cutting and really easy to see how everything's clamped and everything. And it's nice that it mounts parts higher up, so, you know, they're not really close to the table, or they're not, you know, mounted to the table. It's easier to, you know, see everything and work with it. So if you need modular components that you don't see, submit your design to Tosa Tool today. And if you need financing, it's available up to 6 months interest-free through PayPal. Well, until next time, take care.